Salvete discipuli. Now we're going to be talking about chapters 5 and 6. And this is going to be very much involved with the present tense of the verb. So the present tense of the verb. We're not going to focus on conjugations, declensions so much as the verb during this presentation. Tense means time. And right up until Christmas, you're going to be dealing with the present tense. We'll be getting into the imperfect tense, the perfect tense after Christmas as you get into January. But for the most part, in this time period, September, October, November, you're going to be dealing with the present tense. Now, let me give you the full conjugation of a verb here. Let's take the verb amare, to love. This is the infinitive, and I'll be talking about infinitives in another, well, we can talk about it in this chapter because I see there's a note that we're going to be talking about infinitives. Infinitives end in re. That's how I know. In Latin, the words say what they are. When I see the re on the end of a word, it tells me that it means that in English plus the action, to love. That's an infinitive in English. An infinitive means it doesn't have person or number. It just is an infinitive. It's not limited. It's not finite. Okay, let me conjugate a verb for you in English. I call. You call. He calls. And I'll leave a space here to put this in Latin. We call. And I'm going to do something a little silly here. Y'all call. Because I want to differentiate the you plural from the you singular. So I'm just going to say y'all. And they call. Okay, I have just conjugated the verb to call. The infinitive is vocare. I have just conjugated the verb to call in English. I call. You call. He calls. We call. Y'all call. And they call. All these verbs can take a direct object. I call my mother. You call your brother. He calls his dog. Okay, all of these take direct objects. These are regular verbs. Now, let me put it in Latin. Voco. Notice I don't need a pronoun. I don't need a word for I and you and he. Because instead of that, or we, y'all, and they do have pronouns for these in Latin, and you'll be learning them down the line, but they don't need them. Okay, voco, vocas, vocat, there's our friend the T, vocamus, vocatis, vocant. Okay. I have just conjugated the verb vocare, to call, in Latin, in the present tense. Voco, vocas, vocat, vocamus, vocatis, vocant. Notice I'm pronouncing the V as a W. That's how we pronounce it in classical Latin. Voco, vocas, vocat, vocamus, vocatis, vocant. A Latin word is never accented on the last syllable. You would never say voco, vocas, vocat. Even though sometimes students do that to memorize something, it's voco, vocas, vocat, vocamus, vocatis, vocant. Never accented on the last syllable. In French, every word is accented on the last syllable. Now, something significant, people. The O, S, T, mus, tis, and nt are what we call personal endings. Personal endings, because it tells me who's doing the verb. Personal endings. Am I doing it? Are you doing it? Are we doing it? Are they doing it? So these are the personal endings. This means that you don't need to use a pronoun because everyone's different, isn't it? O, S, T, mus, tis, and nt tell me exactly who's doing it. I'm calling, you're doing it, singular. He's doing it, or she, or it. We, y'all, and they. So this is called conjugating the verb. Now, there are families of verbs. In fact, there's 4 families of verbs, and they're called conjugations. The nouns have declensions, Those are families of nouns. We've learned the first declension and the second declension. And the verbs have conjugations. There's 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, and 4. And how do you tell the conjugation of a verb? Well, the book can just tell you what it is. They can put a 1, 2, 3, or 4 when you look up the verb in the back of the book, just like the nouns have M, F, or N for the gender. And I'm going to look in the back of the book, and they don't tell you back here what conjugation it's in, but they do tell you what chapter the word first appeared in. So let me go to just any chapter here and find a verb and see if they do that. No, they don't. So here's what you do when they just don't say 1, 2, 3, or 4. You look at the vowel in front of the infinitive. In the back of the book, whenever they mention a verb, I might as well tell you this now, they don't tell you in the book right away. They give the infinitive. For example, amo, amare. So if I look that up in the back of the book, hope the book doesn't make a liar out of me here. It should say amo, amare, and it does. It says amo, amare, I love. And there's a 12 there, meaning it first appeared in chapter 12. Now, the word amare, when I see the A here in front of the RE, all infinitives will have an RE on the end. And every verb has an infinitive. It's called the second principal part of the verb. Okay, if I cut that off, the little vowel that's left over tells me the conjugation. All verbs whose infinitive has an A in front of the RE are going to be first. So I'm going to put A here. All verbs which have an A in front of the RE are first conjugation. All verbs which have a long E in front of the RE. For example, tenio, which means I hold. Tenere. Notice it sounds long. When you have a long mark, it takes twice as long to pronounce the vowel. Tenio, tenere. That means a second conjugation. Third conjugation have a short E, like dico, dicere. It sounds short. Fourth conjugation verbs have an I before the RE, like audio, audiore. So we have 4 families of verbs, and these will be significant because each family does things differently in its own conjugation, within its own family, its own house, casa. The first conjugation, second conjugation, third, and then there's instances where they all do the same thing. They all have the same personal endings. But they change vowels. And you'll notice that. For example, he carries is a first conjugation verb, so that's porta, P-O-R-A-T. He holds is a second conjugation verb, tenio, tenere, and therefore it's going to be T-E-N-E-T. He speaks would be dicit, D-I-C-I-T. And that's a third conjugation, therefore I-T. And he hears is fourth conjugation. It will also be an I-T, even though it's fourth. Third and fourth look a lot alike. So this is the concept of conjugation. This is the concept of infinitive. Now, infinitives that give us information about what conjugation, infinitives also take part in the sentence. For example, I want to go. Cupio ire. See the RE? I want to stay. Cupio manere. I'm going to put a long E there because it's second conjugation. So this is called a complementary infinitive. And a complementary infinitive fills out the meaning of certain words. For example, I am able. I am able to swim. I am able in Latin is possum. And it takes the complementary infinitive natare. You've heard of a natatorium. I used to be a swim coach. I taught my swimming in a natatorium. Natare, I want to swim. Okay, that's called a complementary infinitive. It fills out the meaning of the verb. Okay, we've gone over the present tense of the verb, and I need to just give you one more bit of advice here. And that's the irregular verb sum. This is the most common verb in the language, in any language, the verb to be sum. And here's the complete conjugation in the present. Memorize this. Sum, est, sumus, estis, and sun. If you were taking French or Spanish or German, you would have to memorize that in those languages. If you had French, je suis, tu es, il est, nous sommes, vous êtes, ils sont. So the same in Spanish. In fact, Spanish has two verbs to be, soy and ser and estaba. So here you have, I am, you are, he is, we are, y'all are, they are. It's an irregular verb. It's irregular because it's not one of these families. It's not first, it's not second, it's not third, and it's not fourth. And even its infinitive looks weird because it doesn't have an RE. It has SE. Okay? So sum, est, sumus, estis, sun. I am, you are, he is, we are, y'all are, they are. This is an irregular verb. It does not take a direct object. It takes a predicate nominative or a predicate adjective, as we saw in chapter 1. So there you are. And the last thing we want to talk about is vocative case. And we'll be talking about this again in relationship to the imperative. How do you tell people what to do? But just for now, the vocative case equals a nominative. I'm just going to make this simple for you. Vocative equals nominative. I haven't even told you what vocative is yet, have I? Vocative was when you call someone by name. Hey, Joe. Hey, George. You call someone by name. Slave, stop that. When you call someone by name, it's the same as the nominative. If Maria, if I want to call her Maria, don't go away. Okay? I'd say noli avere, don't go away. You don't have to worry about this yet. But there's her name as a direct address. It's the same as the nominative. Except, remember I told you in an earlier video that for every time I make a rule, there's an exception. Well, here's the exception. If your name ends in US or IUS, which most men's names did, we're going to have a change. If a person's name ends in US in Latin, in the nominative, when you call them by name, that US is going to change to E. For example, when Caesar lay dying after he was stabbed by his fellow senators, and Brutus came up and stabbed him, he said, et tu, Brute? He didn't say Brutus. He said Brute. He used the vocative. So even while he was dying, he was correct with his Latin grammar. And if your name ends in IUS, the IUS just changes, just stays I. The US drops off and it ends in I. For example, if your name is Lucius, Lucius, and I need Lucius to come over here or to stop talking, Luci, noli dicere, don't talk. Okay, then I'd say Luci. The US would just drop off here. Same with Julius. By the way, J's become I's in Latin. You'll see it's called consonant I, Julius. Okay, if I want to call Julius, I just say Juli. And it would seem, since this only affects words ending in US and IUS, girls' names are totally unaffected by this rule. Same as the nominative, case of address. Valete discipuli,